I'm not much of a mic guy. Is everybody okay at this volume? You can hear me in the back? Cool. A little louder?
Good.
Okay. Oh, that was a thumbs up, not a go higher. Okay. So thanks everybody for coming today. If I can figure out how to get this to work. There we go. Okay. So welcome to Mercury, editorial workflows that work for editorial teams. Before I get started, just a quick show of hands. Who here actually produces content and kind of manages content using WordPress? And who kind of goes through that editorial process? Okay, great. And who does it with a team of at least 2 or more people? Okay. You're a little bit more specifically our audience, but hopefully everybody gets a little bit of value out of this today. And who uses some kind of tool to manage their editorial process, whether that's WordPress itself, Editflow, Trello, Google Docs, something in that vein. Okay, so you might get a little bit of value out of that as well. So real quick, kicking off, who am I? I'm a developer turned product owner. It's been about 8 years of me working and developing with WordPress. I actually went to my first WordCamp in 2011 in Boston. I have a traditional computer science background. I live in Brooklyn, and when I'm not there, I'm living my life as a nomad. All very cliche, but I enjoy it. I work at Alley as a director of strategic technology, leading projects like Fortune Magazine, Colorado Public Radio, and Roll Call. About Alley, we are a full-service digital agency. We are a WordPress VIP partner, and we are hiring. In a nutshell, Alley has a tendency to work with publishers, anyone who creates a large amount of content. We don't do everything in WordPress. We are not a WordPress shop, but we do a lot of things in WordPress and are very heavily involved in the community. So what are editorial workflows? What are we going to talk about today? The purpose of an editorial workflow is to add structure, predictability, and accountability to the editorial process. It's basically a series of steps taken towards creating your content. So why do we create workflows? What are we trying to achieve by adding oversight, processes, and just really putting more work on everybody's plate? Well, when we're creating an editorial workflow, we're really trying to pursue 5 main priorities. First is visibility. That way our clients can check in on the status of any article or any project at any moment. It's just going to be transparent with your data. Time and mental load. We want to minimize the time and attention it takes, especially in-house, to participate in the editorial process. You know, it's always difficult to keep it all in your head, so you got to put it somewhere. Might as well put it in a workflow. Input. We want to maximize the number and the depth of ideas that our clients share with us. The more the merrier. Cadence. We want to make sure that we're scheduling and publishing with some kind of rhythm. And then client voice. Our clients' team members must be 100% happy with how our work fits their voice. So these are just some of the goals, and I totally lifted this list. I did not come up with this, from Oliver Cox, who's a business development manager at L&T. And this basically summarizes why we're interested in workflows and what we hope to gain from creating workflows. So what makes a good workflow? Simplicity. As with many things in life, simple is usually better. Editorial teams are going to have strong opinions about their work, how their work gets done. They're very passionate about their work, otherwise they probably wouldn't be doing it, hopefully. Technology has limitations. There's user interfaces, user experiences to consider. Keep it simple, stupid. It's an old kind of slogan, but it usually works. Without a simple system, you're not going to build trust with your editorial team. They're not going to put a lot of faith into the system and the processes you've put in place or your workflow. Efficiency. Similar to our last point, your process is going to need to be efficient. If you're adding hoops to jump through or teams feel like their time is being wasted, you're going to have trouble keeping people around. An efficient workflow is going to save you time, it's going to save you energy, and it's going to prevent a lot of confusion. Clarity. You need to define what's needed at each stage of your workflow. If I'm being held responsible for something, I need to be clear on what the expectations are. I need to be clear on what is expected of me and what I'm going to be able to produce. Without clarity, you're not going to be able to deliver on those things. Your workflow should make it obvious as to what needs to happen, how it needs to happen, and then what comes next. Involvement. Your editorial team is going to need to be involved. You can't just do this in a nutshell. You're going to need outside voices. You're going to need people to tell you how this should be done. You very rarely can't work inside of a bubble. As I kind of hinted at earlier, the more the merrier. There's wisdom in crowds. And accountability, also very similar, but workflows offer a clear chain of command. Someone working on a workflow task is going to understand exactly who they're accountable for, or what they're accountable for, who they're accountable to. This is also going to ensure that designers or legal teams or medical teams can be properly involved in the process at the appropriate stages. This is going to make delegation easier. It's going to allow you to hold people accountable for the work that they create. And also you're going to be able to get a high-level picture of what's happening in your organization or what's happening at the editorial level through this accountability. So that's where Mercury comes in. WordPress has a long history as one of the best technical solutions for publishing content. Plugins like Editflow, CoAuthors Plus are all well-established and essential tool for publishers. A large piece of this puzzle that's often missing is a fully featured publishing workflow. Mercury is a Gutenberg-first open source solution to editorial workflow and management, and using the Mercury plugin opens up a whole new realm of possibilities for editorial teams. And that was the description for the talk. So that's how this all starts to fit together. Now that we've kind of walked through what a workflow is, I'm going to get out of this, and we're going to actually just dive right into Mercury with an example workflow that I've gone ahead and put together. So I have a fresh install here of WordPress. All I have done is installed Editflow, which is optional for Mercury, but we do build on top of some of the functionality there. So while it's not a requirement, it is useful to have because I'm lazy and I didn't want to redo it. And then we also have Mercury itself and Field Manager, which is one of our dependencies just to help easily scaffold out our fields. Out of the box, not much is going to change except for our Mercury tab here at the very bottom. And when we hover over that, we have workflows, we have tasks, and we have settings. Workflows is going to look fairly familiar. It's just a post screen, it's a custom post type. And you're going to be able to create as many workflows as you want. So whether you have one team or 20 teams, you're going to be able to create a workflow that's totally customized to exactly their needs. Within a workflow, you're going to go through any number of tasks. For the sake of our demo, I've set up 5 that are going to run through, and we're going to get pretty in detail with these, but compose story, initial edit, design, final edit, and published. As you can imagine, those feel like stages of an editorial workflow. And then last but not least, and I'll kind of kick it off here with just general settings, being able to rename some things, apply it to various post types, enable various filters and kind of statistics and assignments, and we'll get into some of these a little bit more, as well as theme your plugin to fit with your personal brand. So if I go into posts and I hit add new, I am able to kick off the editorial process. So within Mercury, I'm going to select my workflow and I'm going to start creating a blog post. So right off the bat, compose story. It's the first task, so I'm up to bat. Every task is going to come with the concept of an assignee, which is optional, and then any number of meta fields, which may or may not be required. So in this case, my idea here is that I'm going to compose my story, I'm going to set up some basic information, and then pass it off to the writer for the initial edit. So I might say, I need this by November 1st. Some of our goals might be great SEO. I need about 250 to 1,000 characters, or words rather, and I'm going to assign the next step to my group of copy editors. I'm going to just give this an example title. A little lorem. And I'm going to go ahead and transition to initial edit. Now, right off the bat, my assignee is going to become copy editors, which, if we took a look into Editflow, is built on top of the user groups. So I might have a bunch of, and that would probably explain, I haven't assigned anybody to copy editors, But this allows us to build on top of Editflow's groups, which allow you to basically group together users into various roles. So we can very quickly identify copy editors, photographers, reporters, section editors, assign our users and our teams to these various groups, and then say, I don't care who, but I need someone from copy edit to pick this up. I'm not logged in as that user, but there's this concept of assignees. So I might be able to look at what's assigned to any given user at any given time. So I'm going to be able to see who has what on their plates. And I'm also going to be able to see my tasks. And I'm also going to be able to filter by which of those tasks within any given workflow are assigned to me. So I might come in here as the editor for the initial edit process, and I'm going to be able to see some of those details that were set up in the compose story. So this is actually going to pass along some of this basic information to me, like what are my goals for writing this? What are my word counts? And all of this you'll see in a few moments is completely editable, completely customizable, and you have a lot of very fine-grained control over how this works. So let's say I go in here, I create my article, and I'm ready to send it off to the design team. Well, I have a couple actions here. I can send to the design team, I could skip design and proceed to final edit, or I could say it's missing story details and send it back to compose story. I'm going to pass it back to the initial editor. I'm going to then send it to design. Design might confirm that they've added a featured image. They might pass it off to final edit, who's going to do things like add a title, add a description, add in some tags, confirm some publishing checklist items, and then at the end of it, you're done. It's published. You're good. Digging into how this is set up, let's start with the workflow itself. And all of this is managed through a slightly complex, but hopefully straightforward enough GUI. So we are able to name our workflow, and we're able to give it a unique slug that it's referred to, and then we outline our basic tasks. Not too much going on there. If we start looking at compose story, we get a lot more options here. So in a similar vein, we're going to name and give our slug, give our task a slug, a unique slug, as well as unique post status. So we are leveraging custom post statuses here to kind of drive that and allow you to very easily filter the current state of affairs. So I can very easily come in here and so show me all of the posts that are in any given state. So for example, here I can see this one's in initial edit, which is something custom that I've designed. We can also control our assignments with a decent amount of granularity. By default, I can say my assignee for a task might be set to nobody, or myself, or the author of the post who created it, or a specific user, or a specific group. I might want to allow them to select the assignee, in which we can then build on and say, well, do you want to send it to maybe everybody who's an editor, everybody who's an author, everyone who's a contributor? If you have custom roles, this is a great way to utilize that. You can also build a completely custom list of as many individuals, users as you want, as many groups as you want, or as many roles as you want. So a lot of flexibility and a lot of options for determining who can see, who gets tasks sent to them, et cetera, et cetera. We're able to define transitions. Transitions meaning I'm on task A, can I go to B, can I go to C? Can I skip 2 of them and hop right to E? So a lot of flexibility there. And then last but not least, these fields, which allow us to scaffold out custom meta of a couple different types. We have everything from radios to checkboxes, checkbox flags, dates, drop downs, text areas, rich text areas, text fields, and assignees. We are able to give them labels, various meta to tell me more about it, slugs, which are going to store it all in post meta, so you can actually control exactly where each piece of meta is stored and how it's stored, which allows you to do some really interesting things like reference data across multiple tasks, and if you change it in one place, that change will be reflected across the board. That allows you to very easily hijack anything in Gutenberg that's happening, so you can write very deep integrations with custom blocks, custom plugins, whatever it may be. And it's all very extensible. So that's the basic overview and interface of Mercury, creating workflows, creating tasks, starting to pull them all together to design your own workflow. But let's say, for example, in Final Edit, I wanted to add another field for, I don't know, let's say Facebook Open Graph title. And then I decide how I want it stored. I want to make sure it's required, and I can have a default value. Like in this case, it probably doesn't make too much sense to have a default value because it's not going to be dynamic to pull from the title. It's not quite that intelligent right now. But if I refresh the workflow screen itself, we should see Final Edit as Facebook Open Graph. So again, just a lot of flexibility here, a lot of kind of baked in available field types to be able to really craft the workflow that's going to work for you. So now let's talk about what you need to think about or what you should consider, or really a process for developing your workflow. So the first step is going to be determine who needs to be involved. What does your team or your teams look like? Who are your stakeholders that need to sign off on content being produced? Who's actually proofing what's being written here? You'll want to identify editors, chiefs of staff, copywriters, freelancers, supplementary roles like designers, medical teams, lawyers, if there's any consideration there. Workflows can be very complicated. There can be a lot of people involved and a lot of people who need sign off here. Determine your tasks. So what are the different tasks for your workflow? Maybe you have content ideas and you need to set up some SEO items like we just saw, keywords, page titles, title tags, meta descriptions. Maybe you need to assign certain roles to certain tasks. Freelancers, writers, designers, things like we just saw. You'll need to review content for grammatical errors, spelling mistakes, plagiarism. You'll want to accept content and mark it as final and schedule it so that it goes out with the proper cadence that we were talking about earlier. And of course, you'll want to add images and other kind of interactives that are going to create more engaging content. Understanding workflow progression. Understanding how your teams really need to go from step A to step B. Understanding who needs to have final say of something and when they need to have final say of it. Are they able to go forwards in steps? Are they only allowed to go backwards? Are there certain requirements that they need to hit in order to progress? Creating a definition of done. In order to have that clarity and accountability, I need to understand what I'm trying to deliver here. So you need to determine for each task, what is done? What does done mean to me? When do I know I'm actually finished with this part of the puzzle and it can progress? And then holding people accountable. You know, a lot of this only really works if there's someone there accountable for these actions. Workflows are only going to work if everybody's on board and accountable for their piece of the puzzle. So like I mentioned earlier on, there's a couple other solutions out there. You can roll your own solution in Trello. Basecamp's a popular option as well. Within WordPress, there's Editflow and Oasis Workflow that offer alternatives. But I think Mercury is pretty cool and we're pretty happy with it. So it is open source. The documentation is absolute crap, but I will be working on that at some point. So I do apologize for that. There's only so many hours in a day. But it is all open source if you're interested in checking it out. A couple of references that I use just to create this talk, and honestly I snagged a lot of it from these great resources, so you know, full kudos and credit to them for helping me get on the right track. And that's it. Thank you.
Can you go back to
So I think we have plenty of time for questions, and if anybody actually cares, I can always go into some of the really technical details of how we built it, how Gutenberg works, but one thing at a time. So, yes?
Did you need all the three plugins to kind of work, or can you just use Mercury by itself?
Sure. So the dependencies for Mercury, the only dependency is Field Manager, which is what generates all of the editorial kind of interface stuff that you see when you're actually creating and creating the tasks and creating the workflows. It's not a hard requirement. You could write a bunch of code and just kind of have it do it itself. But yeah, we do sit on top of Field Manager, which is another plugin that Ali has written. If you're familiar with like advanced custom fields or some of those other ones, Field Manager is a kind of developer-focused solution to that same problem.
Do you need Editflow as well? Or
You don't need Editflow.
Okay.
It's good for the groups though. The groups are really kind of a nice feature there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I manage, different properties using WordPress. It used to be awesome, easy and simple, and it's just become a fight. I literally, when I go into WordPress and I'm like, right? So how would Mercury, like one of our new properties is sports. And as I'm talking and listening, I'm also writing about Ron, China, and Dutch. So how would, nothing's dumb, I'm sorry, I'm feeling hot tea guys. But, like, I just need simplicity, because I have 3 generations reading. I have, you know, old people, millennials who don't know who Destiny Child is, and Generation Z. So I need to figure out how to make it possible for whatever, if your product is gonna make it easier for me to publish and other people, because ultimately, I cannot be the only person. It used to be simple, but I can't. So now, like, to be able to do something like what you're talking about, and have multiple people doing multiple stuff, you know, but it sounds like, content management, training levels, like, what would you say is the entry level was in training process, and, you know, could interns handle Mercury?
Yeah. Yeah, with proper documentation that I haven't written yet, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, everything you just saw is, I didn't go through a full.
Great, it looks great, but
Yeah.
I'm just like, am I gonna sit there and babysit these people to figure out?
I mean,
I'm doing it myself.
I hope not. We do have this deployed on at least one project that has about 5 or 6 teams. Some of those teams have upwards of 100+ people. I think from a usability standpoint, it's pretty clear, it's pretty concise, at least for the people who are actually managing the day-to-day content creation. I will be the first to admit that the workflow and task creation process could use a little polish, but once you get through some of that initial setup and understand what you're looking for and you're able to iterate on that process, I do think it's a pretty straightforward tool to be able to understand and use. And it sounds like you would really benefit from the workflow, multiple workflows. So being able to actually choose and kind of really specify the process for different teams or different types of content. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be we have a workflow of team A, a workflow of team B.
So
It could be either workflow.
I could set like a style guide.
Right, exactly. So you could say like I want a workflow for blog posts. I want a workflow for video content. I want a workflow for this demographic, whatever it may be. There's a lot of different options there. It's built to be a completely blank slate for you to build upon. Does that answer your question, okay?
It does, it does.
Okay, great, thank you.
How soon are you gonna write that?
I'll tell you what, I'll get you a card and then we can stay in contact that way. You'll be the first to know.
I wanted to know how heavy is this plugin? Like, let's say I have a site and it has a lot of content on it, and I want to use this to get my team together because I have a team who works on the same website. We keep it updated constantly for the company I work for. Will this bog down the site?
No,
No?
this thing's great. We work with enterprise level clients. So I mean, we're talking about millions of posts on servers that cost thousands of dollars and are very kind of high tier stuff. And all of this is built on React. All of this is built on top of Gutenberg. It's using a lot of the stuff that's already loaded when Gutenberg spins up. So it's not like we're rolling our own solutions. We're not importing a bunch of libraries or frameworks to get this done. This is built from the ground up with performance in mind. I think we have one over here first, and then we'll come back around.
If multiple people work on multiple tasks, of course there will be a conflict of opinions.
Mhm.
And for instance, I create a group of people who create images, or image preparers,
Mhm.
Photoshoppers, and the other group, text editors or content preparers. So, and then the content people, they disagree with the image people that no, these images don't fit
Mhm.
our content. So is there kind of a conflict resolution way where, for instance, text people would create a case we don't agree, and unless it is resolved, the software wouldn't allow to final edit?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the considerations to make is that WordPress doesn't support two users editing the same post at the same time. It's a very complicated technical problem that, as much as WordPress would like to solve, it doesn't look like it's happening as soon as we'd like. So we just need to keep in mind that there's always going to be one person editing the post at a time. But what that actually means is that you can ensure that you have a task where it's assigned to your content producers, and they are able to perhaps describe what they want from the design team. They're able to then assign it to the design team. The design team can act on that, and then there can be a task after that that says like approval, design approval, which can then go back and you can set up so that it automatically goes to the people who are assigned in the last step. So you're kind of saying, you know, take the content producers, pass it to the designers, designers give me something, pass it back to them, and then they can either approve it and pass it, let that keep going in the right direction, or send it back to the designers and do another loop until they're satisfied. And you can do that with, you can enable, Editflow has a really cool editorial comments, so you can actually like tag people and do threads. That sitting on top of Mercury is definitely an option. You can also just set up an empty text space that says like area for notes. We've seen that a lot, just an area for notes. Hey, you did this wrong. We're actually looking for X, Y, and Z. Do it again. So a lot of flexibility there.
So the pyramid loop, it's not like the pyramid, one person on top controlling every group. So groups and assigning tasks to groups,
Mm-hmm.
but groups themselves can also communicate and assign to each other tasks and approve them.
Yeah. None of this is dictated by Mercury. You're in complete control. You can set up so that there's like a boss on top and everything trickles down, or you can have groups where they just pass off and you're expecting them to be able to collaborate and work together. It gives you the flexibility to do all of that. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I think we were up over here.
So I wondered, when you were managing the status of these tasks or these posts, are you hooking into WordPress's like native the statuses of like publish and draft? Are you adding things into that list?
Yep. Is that I don't have a much detailed answer besides yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay,
I
cool.
wasn't sure if that could be done, but.
Yeah, there's a function,
That's
register
like
post
okay.
status. It doesn't have great core support, it has enough to get the job done, but there's a post status API that's eventually gonna deploy, but it's still very much in the works. Yeah.
I run local news websites in New Jersey,
Great.
so I have a lot of freelancers, they're not necessarily logged in,
Mhm.
and it might sound like a basic question, but
Proof of concept, it's just not baked into Mercury yet. We built something out custom, because then you get in a whole kind of, now I have to manage email notifications. There's actually a proposal for a new API on WordPress for notifications. I think it's Notify. There you go.
I'm on it.
So
what kind of, is that email or push or?
We're working
anything.
on it.
Yeah, they're working.
It's gonna have a way to queue notifications in general across WordPress, and then depending on the user type, if you're a technical user, you get fed notifications one way. If you're not a technical user, you only come to the dashboard, you're gonna get notifications fed a different way. So that's coming.
Yeah. So I think the roadmap for that is probably a little while out still. I
Yeah.
wouldn't expect it tomorrow.
Right now I use like Airtable and Google Docs.
Yeah.
Or so.
6.0.
Yeah. So, but yeah, notifications are definitely on our roadmap. The problem is to roll our own there's pros and cons. You know, that's a big time investment. Would we like to? Yes. Are we going to, ideally, when? I'll let you know as soon as the docs are written. That's right next to the line.
Are you tied, or do you now, do you plan to tie this in with, say, some project management tool you can put in the timing for each of the tasks and have some way to monitor where people are on the schedule? I didn't notice any time constraints in the news.
No, there wasn't. There wasn't. That's an interesting point, though. I don't know if that's ever come up. It wouldn't be difficult.
Well, there's a lot of project management tools that have this kind of thing where you can divide it, like you could add like a Gantt chart or something like that, where you can actually see where
Yeah,
people
see how
are.
much time. I mean, that's a good point. That's definitely something we'll consider, because I think that'd be a really valuable feature, especially when we're talking about like freelancers or something else where you really want to track the time, especially if someone's getting paid hourly. That's interesting.
Not just pay, you want to know, not just assign it, let
Right,
me know
that's where
what
the
it's
time
on.
is, yeah. Yeah, that's, you can break it down, see who's spending how much time, where are your bottlenecks in terms of the steps, where are your bottlenecks in terms of the people, where are the bottlenecks in terms of the groups. Yeah, I think that'd be really useful data to have.
Or a critical path.
Right, exactly. That's a great suggestion, thank you.
Question, this is all going into the same DB, you can pull from it, where is it actually writing? I didn't see the scope, is it writing to post meta?
Yep.
You can pick which one?
This is all going straight into post meta. Let me do something real quick and I'll give you a full detailed answer. This will only take me a moment. I just gotta drop in a plugin from somewhere else here. So Meta Inspector is a riff off of the Post Meta Inspector that I kind of just hijacked and forked. And so we could see here, Mercury out of the box is going to offer some basic kind of just, it's going to make some decisions for you about some of the values. Like it's going to store the active workflow slug, the in progress task slug, the selected task, you know, all these things that are going to tell me like, okay, publish is currently highlighted, we're looking at blog posts, yada, yada, yada. But then, for example, I told this due date field to store it in a field called due-date or goals to store in goals. So we could see that reflected right here as kind of native types directly in the post meta. And if I could, you know what, I thought this might come up and I should have looked up the syntax. What is it? What is it? WP.data.
What are you looking for?
What's the core selector, core edit? What's the syntax to get to that dispatcher?
wp.data.select.
Sorry, which one is it? wp.data.select?
wp.data.select, yeah.
There it is. And then core edits, right? No. Editor.
Get edited. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So I'm gonna pick one. Let's just say I'm gonna do word count. So we can see here. So this little line here. Yeah. This little line here, wp.data.select core editor get post attribute meta word count, is basically saying, dig into Gutenberg, get me my core data, get me my meta, and get the value of word count. So if I change this to that and then re-grab that, I'm gonna see that automatically updating Gutenberg. So under the hood, these are actually all using React hooks and the core stores in Gutenberg to watch for changes, to update everywhere, basically. So again, I can have the same task. I get to use the same field in multiple tasks, and I'm gonna have that kind of data parity where it's just gonna stay up to date. And then what's really cool is because it's all living on top of Gutenberg, it makes it so easy to extend and just build on top of. Core Mercury has a handful of hooks and filters. So you can do things like before the meta gets set, I wanna apply this function to clean the data, to sanitize it, to modify it, whatever you need to do. When a task has completed, I'm gonna fire an action so that I can hook it into it to fire emails. or to trigger a little snack bar confirming that things have happened. There's a lot of possibility, and we've really built it for extending. Yes,
I have a design question, so if it's not you, that's okay.
it's fine.
It's so ugly. Like, it's the standard WordPress look, right? And knowing that with React, there's so many different ways to do it.
Sure.
You could do a modal, you could do different like experiences. So why is it ugly? Like, why not bring in great design from React or something?
It's an interesting question. I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Well, because it's like, even like Yoast and everyone, they're trying to get out of having in the footer, right? And if you're trying to like, right, like why not the sidebar? Why not a modal? Have you guys experimented with any of that?
Not too much.
Okay.
To be honest, not too much. One, I mean, in the Gutenberg sidebar, I hate the Gutenberg sidebar.
Yeah.
It's like 2 inches wide. You really don't have a lot of real estate there to work.
Yeah.
Modals, I always have qualms with modals.
Yeah.
It's just, it's usually more of a headache than it's really worth, in my opinion. A lot of these, some of this field, some of this stuff we actually are pulling from libraries, just because why reinvent, why roll our own form stuff once again. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's really supposed to be kind of just dumb and intuitive. I mean, I'm a big proponent of dumb design. You have your tasks. Here's my task. I go to the next task.
All right.
Could it use some sprucing up? Yeah. Could it use something? Sure. What does that look like? I don't think we've put a lot of time into it. I don't think we've put a lot of thought into it. I don't know if Owen, who actually designed it, wants to comment on any of this.
Sorry, I just like, it looks like forms. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It look, and
I mean,
that's
what
like,
it is though. It's a
yeah,
form.
I know, I totally get that, but I'm just saying.
90-95% of our development effort into just getting it working.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. No, because I know it's a pain, but I wasn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that too comes from my proof of concept. This is what my proof of concept looked like. So I don't want to put Owen under the bus here.
Yeah, because I just say like, because like the guy like, and again, I know they're more consumer, but like CoBlocks and all of them, they like have interesting interfaces, and it makes it like easier. And so I'm just saying like, I know it still looks like WordPress, right? And like one of the exciting things is now it doesn't have to look like WordPress. And I was curious because that's like the thing, like WordPress, the admin, it's WordPress, right? And like there's like exciting stuff going on, like all like React libraries you can borrow. So I was curious.
Yeah, I would say there's value in keeping things consistent though. And predictable. I mean, I know when we talk about managing editorial teams, or when you have hundreds of people and they say, is this going to be something they pick up? If they have to learn a new interface and a new kind of unique thing for every plugin we install, every plugin we drop in, I think there's something valuable about saying, you go into it and it's not scary. You're like, oh, this looks like what I'm used to. This kind of feels like what I like. This feels approachable.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always room for improvement. There's always room for growth. So I hear you, and I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it's cool. It's really cool. But I was like, why forms, man? Like, yeah, all right.
I know, forums. What are you gonna do?
Is any of this available to us right now?
Yeah, it's all open source. At that URL.
Are you all at all concerned about the, weird states Editflow is in, maintainability wise, in terms of like kind of somewhat leveraging Editflow versus biting the bullet and reinventing it?
I've actually considered taking over Editflow, like just owning it.
Do the fork.
Just do the fork and owning it, especially at Alley, because we do so much work in that space. I'm gonna be honest, I think like half of Editflow is just kind of pointless. Like I think the calendar doesn't provide a lot of value. It's not really feature complete. Groups I'm fine with, but again, that could probably use some sprucing up and some more modern interfaces. I think the entire thing should probably be rebuilt and kind of thought through like a Gutenberg-first in mind. I do like some of the work that PublishPress is doing. Ever since they bought out, who did the Byline fork? I think it was just called Bylines, right? So they bought out Bylines, and now it's multiple Bylines 3.0 or whatever that just came out. I'm inclined to maybe leave that part of the puzzle to PublishPress. If the need arises and we need to build out some of those tools, we usually have other solutions. Like the first thing I do when I turn on Editflow is I turn half of Editflow off. So it's a weird time. I'm definitely interested to talk to some automaticians and kind of pick their brain about it and see where the future of that really is going to pan out. But I mean, when was the last time we got a new feature in Editflow? It's been years. So.
Do you think you're going to build on top of or integrate with PublishPress?
Probably not, just because it's a pay model.
Gotcha.
And I think if we're gonna support the open source, we wanna support the open source. We actually have an open source fork of the Byline's plugin as well that kind of is now in direct competition with that and co-authors that we're still kind of battle testing. So, you know, it's stuff like that that we're definitely interested in, but always through an open source kind of mindset. All right. Well, I think that's it then. Going once, going twice. All right, well, thank you all very much.